The snow outside my window looked like falling glass, each flake catching the light from the street lamps below my penthouse balcony. Inside, the table was set for 12. Crystal glasses, golden cutlery, linen napkins folded into perfect roses. A far cry from the chipped plates of my childhood Christmas dinners. I adjusted the silver bracelet on my wrist, one my assistant gifted me this morning with a card that read, "To the woman who built her own miracle." I smiled, but the smile never reached my eyes. My phone buzzed. A name flashed on the screen I hadn't seen in years. Dad. For a long moment, I just stared. 10 years of silence, reduced to 2 syllables. Then the message appeared. "We're in town. Can we talk?" My chest tightened. The words pulled me backward. To that dinner table, the smell of roasted turkey, the sound of laughter dying mid-bite. I walked to the window, the city lights blurring like tears I refused to shed. From this high up, even pain looked small. Still, my hands trembled. I thought I had buried that night. Turns out, it was just waiting for Christmas to dig itself out again. I whispered to my reflection, "You wanted me out of the house, Dad. Funny how I built one of my own." Then I silenced my phone, exhaled, and turned back toward the glittering table, ready for guests who thought they knew success, but had never tasted survival. I was 19 that Christmas. Our house smelled of pine needles, burnt gravy, and tension. Dad sat at the head of the table in his usual spot, carving the turkey like it was an enemy to be defeated. Beside him, my stepmother, Linda, poured herself another glass of Chardonnay, pretending not to notice how I kept glancing at the empty chair where Mom used to sit. It had been 5 years since she died, but somehow her ghost still made more noise than any of us. I'd just finished my first semester at community college. I was proud, working nights at a diner to pay tuition, getting straight A's, surviving. I thought maybe tonight they'd see that. Maybe Dad would be proud, too. But then Linda laughed. That sharp little laugh that always meant trouble. "So, Olivia," she said, slicing into the ham, "how's that little art dream of yours? Still doodling when you should be finding a real job." Dad didn't even look up. "Ain't no future in sketching, Liv. You can't keep living off this family forever." My fork paused halfway to my mouth. "I'm not living off anyone," I said quietly. "I pay my own rent now." Linda smirked. "On tips? Please. You're a sweet girl, but let's be honest. You'll come running back when that fantasy dries up." The room went still. My stepbrother snorted into his mashed potatoes. And then Dad slammed his knife down. "You're a burden, Olivia. Always have been. You drain this house, emotionally, financially, all of it. Maybe it's time you get out for good." The words hit harder than the sound of the silverware clattering to the floor. I stared at him, waiting for a sign, some flicker of regret. There was none, just the cold reflection of the Christmas lights in his glasses. So I stood. My legs felt like someone else's. I grabbed my coat from the chair, the cheap one I'd bought at Goodwill, and my old backpack from beside the tree. Before I left, I glanced at the small ornament hanging from a lower branch, one of Mom's handmade snow globes. Inside, a tiny girl stood in a swirl of glitter, alone but still shining. I took it, slipped it into my pocket. My stepmother started to protest, but I didn't care. Outside, snow fell in thick sheets, muffling the sound of my own heartbeat. I walked until I couldn't feel my fingers, or my face, or the weight of their rejection. Only one thought repeated in my head. If I'm such a burden, maybe I'll learn to carry myself. The first winter alone was the hardest. I rented a single room above a laundromat on the east side of town. The radiator hissed all night, and the ceiling leaked whenever it snowed. Still, it was mine. Every morning, I'd work the breakfast shift at Mason's Diner, pouring coffee for people who never looked up long enough to see the girl behind the name tag. At night, I'd stay up drawing by the dim light of a desk lamp that buzzed like a nervous heartbeat. My fingertips were always stained with graphite. My dreams, too. Some nights, I'd take out the little snow globe from my coat pocket, shake it, watch the glitter fall around the tiny figure inside. I'd whisper, "You're not alone anymore." By the end of that year, I'd saved enough for an online design course. It was just a start, but it felt like opening a window after years of breathing through glass. That's where I met Margaret Hale, the instructor who changed everything. She was in her 50s, elegant but fierce, with streaks of silver in her black hair and an energy that filled the screen. "Talent is cheap," she told me during one of our late-night Zoom critiques. "Discipline is rare. You've got both, Olivia. Don't you dare waste it trying to please people who already decided not to see you." Her words carved space inside me where self-doubt used to live. She became my mentor, helped me refine my portfolio, introduced me to clients who didn't care that I worked from a secondhand laptop on a desk made of old crates. The first time a company paid me for a logo design, $300, I cried so hard the tears smeared the ink on my sketchpad. It wasn't about the money. It was proof. Proof that I wasn't the failure they'd painted me to be. Months turned into years. The diner shifts turned into freelance projects. The projects turned into a small studio, Bennett Creative, named quietly after myself, without telling a soul. I learned contracts, taxes, branding, everything my father once said I'd never understand. I wore secondhand suits to first meetings and pretended not to notice when people underestimated me. But every no became fuel. Every rejection added another layer to the armor I didn't know I was forging. When I finally landed my first big client, a luxury home brand in Chicago, I celebrated alone in my apartment with takeout Chinese and a bottle of cheap champagne. I texted Margaret a photo of the signed contract. She replied, "This is your beginning, not your peak. Keep going." And I did. By year 8, I wasn't working for anyone anymore. I had employees, offices, clients across states. Still, every Christmas, when snow began to fall, I'd open that old snow globe, watch the glitter swirl, and remember that girl who walked out into the cold with nothing but hope in her pocket. I never posted my success, never tagged locations, or bragged online, because part of me wanted to keep the peace. And another part, the stronger part, was waiting. Waiting for the day they'd finally see me again. 10 years later, I had almost forgotten what my father's voice sounded like. But when he called again that December morning, something in me stilled. "We're in the city," he said. "We thought maybe we could stop by."
I didn't ask why.
I just said, "Sure," and ended the call. The truth was I already knew. Word had gotten around. The new creative agency downtown, the woman behind the million-dollar branding deals, the one whose initials matched mine. Bennett Creative. I had made sure the name was easy to remember. That evening, as the city glowed under layers of Christmas lights, I set the stage. Not for revenge, but for revelation. My office was a reflection of everything I'd built from the ruins, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the skyline, minimalist furniture, and art prints from young designers I sponsored. In one corner stood a glass display shelf. Inside it, my mother's snow globe. The same one I'd taken the night I left. When the elevator doors opened, I saw them before they saw me. Dad, older, shoulders heavier. Linda, wrapped in a fur coat that looked borrowed, her perfume too strong, her smile too uncertain. My stepbrother hung back, pretending to check his phone. "Olivia," Dad said, stepping forward. "You look well." I smiled politely. "You too. Please sit." They did, glancing around the office, their eyes darting from the framed magazine covers to the awards on the wall. Linda was the first to speak. "This place is stunning. Do you work here?" I almost laughed.
Yes.
"You could say that." Dad's gaze landed on the logo etched on the glass wall behind me, Bennett Creative Studio, and his brow furrowed. "Wait, you're Bennett Creative?" I nodded slowly. "Founder and CEO." Silence. The kind that hums in your chest like static before a storm. Linda's lips parted, but no words came out. My stepbrother looked at me, as if seeing a ghost. Dad leaned back in his chair, eyes wide, mouth tight. I didn't know." "No," I said softly. "You didn't care to." He blinked, as if the words stung more than he expected. I stood, walked to the window, and spoke without turning around. "You told me I was a burden. That night, 10 years ago, you said I drained this family. Dad lowered his head. Olivia, I was angry. Things were hard. Hard, I repeated.
Yeah.
For all of us. I turned back to face them. But I carried that night with me like luggage I couldn't put down. Every rejection, every sleepless night, every deal I signed, I heard your voice. And instead of breaking me, it built me. The clock on the wall ticked softly. The city outside glowed like 1,000 witnesses. Linda cleared her throat. We didn't come here to fight. We just thought maybe you could help. Of course. There it was. The real reason. Help. I asked, folding my arms. Dad hesitated. We lost the house. The mortgage, things got bad. We're trying to start over. For a moment, I said nothing. Just studied the faces that once watched me walk into the snow with nothing but a backpack. Then I smiled, calm, measured. You know, I used to wish for this. For the chance to stand where I am right now. But now that I'm here, I looked down at my mother's snow globe, its glitter still swirling gently in the case. It doesn't feel like revenge. It feels like peace. They sat there, silent, the weight of years between us pressing down. I'll help, I said finally. But not the way you think. Dad's eyes lifted, hopeful. I'll help you rebuild, if you're ready to face what tore it all down. Linda frowned. What do you mean? I mean honesty, accountability, growth. I met her eyes. Because money can't fix what pride destroyed. I watched as the truth sank in, the silence between us turning from tension to reflection. And for the first time, I didn't feel small in their presence. I felt whole. I didn't want them to see me as a savior.
I wanted them to see themselves.
So I sat across from them, folded my hands, and let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. Dad, I began softly. You taught me to be strong, just not in the way you intended. You thought throwing me out would teach me humility. But it taught me independence. It taught me to stand up, even when the floor disappears beneath you. He rubbed his temples, his voice barely above a whisper. I was wrong, Liv. I see that now. I nodded.
Good.
Because admitting that is the first step. Linda shifted in her chair, her eyes glassy but defensive. We didn't mean to hurt you. We just wanted what was best. What was best for you? I corrected gently. You wanted quiet, control, perfection at the dinner table. I didn't fit that picture. She looked away. I stood and walked to the shelf where my mother's snow globe sat. I picked it up carefully, watching the glitter fall in slow motion. You see this? Mom made it when I was little. She told me once, even in the coldest snowstorm, you can create your own light.
I didn't understand it then.
Now I do. I turned back toward them. I'll help you get back on your feet. But there are conditions. Dad straightened. Anything. One, I said, holding up a finger. You both need to work. Not for me, for yourselves. No shortcuts, no pity. You can stay in one of my smaller rental properties for 6 months, rent-free. After that, you start paying like everyone else. Linda's mouth fell open. You'd let us live there? Yes, I said simply. But only if you volunteer twice a week at the Community Art Center downtown. They need hands and humility. Her eyes welled up. I can do that. 2, I continued, turning to my father. You need to talk to Ethan. He frowned. Your stepbrother? No, I said quietly. Your son. The boy who learned to mimic your silence. He needs your honesty more than your advice. Dad swallowed hard. For once, he didn't argue. And 3, I said, setting the snow globe back in its place, you don't ever get to call me a burden again. Not to me, not to anyone. Linda nodded slowly. We understand. I smiled, a small, genuine smile.
Good.
Then we start over. But this time, it's on equal ground. For a while, nobody spoke. The sound of the city below filled the space, distant horns, muffled laughter, the hum of life continuing. Dad finally whispered, Olivia, you became everything I never thought you could be. I met his gaze.
No, Dad.
I became everything you were too afraid to believe I could be. He looked down, tears slipping through the cracks of his pride. In that moment, I realized forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It meant remembering and choosing peace anyway. So I poured them each a glass of water, lifted mine slightly, and said, "To rebuilding, honestly, this time." And for the first time in 10 years, my father raised his glass to me. It's been 3 months since that night. The snow has melted, but the lessons haven't. Every Saturday, I stop by the downtown art center, quietly, without letting anyone announce who I am. And every time, I see Linda there, hair tied back, sleeves rolled up, helping kids with paintbrushes twice her size. She laughs now, genuinely. She listens. Sometimes, when she thinks no one's watching, she wipes her eyes and stares at the snow globe keychain she carries, a smaller replica of mine that I gave her the day she started. Dad works at a hardware store nearby. He takes the bus. He's never complained once. Last week, he called to tell me he'd fixed up a bike for one of the neighborhood boys who couldn't afford one. It was the first time he'd said he was proud of something good he did, not proud of what he owned. And that, I realized, was progress. We don't talk about the past often. It sits quietly between us like the space between heartbeats, still there, but no longer painful. Sometimes, when I visit their new place, small, cozy, with light filtering through white curtains, I see my snow globe on their shelf.
The same one from that night.
Dad insists on keeping it there, says it reminds him that storms can make you stronger if you survive them. And I've survived mine. One evening, I stood by their window, watching the snow begin to fall again, slow, soft, familiar. I could almost see my 19-year-old self out there, coat too thin, eyes burning from cold and heartbreak, walking toward a future she couldn't even imagine. I wanted to tell her, it gets better. You get better. You'll build a life so bright that even the people who dimmed your light will have to squint to see you. When I left that night, Dad hugged me, awkwardly, but sincerely. His voice cracked when he said, "Thank you for not giving up on me." I whispered back, "You taught me how." On the drive home, city lights flickered against my windshield like scattered stars. I reached into my purse, pulled out my snow globe, and turned it in my hands. The tiny girl inside still stood alone, but now, she looked radiant. The glitter fell like tiny sparks of forgiveness. I placed it on my dashboard, smiled, and whispered the final words that would stay with me forever. Once, they called me a burden. Turns out, I was just the weight of my own worth. And with that, I drove into the snow, not running from my past, but carrying it gracefully into everything I'd become.